Unprecedented global events in the last 2 years have really tested our resilience and our immunity. The fear of our well being, the stress of the looming dangers of COVID, the health and safety of our loved ones and ourselves have added to the dip in our immunity. You may ask, what part does stress play in our immunity, or what fear and loneliness does to our resilience? And that is exactly what we're going to discuss today. The phrase living with COVID is a reality. And therefore, we must up our understanding of the immunity, boosting our immunity, the interaction of the body, mind, emotions, and the part we play in our own constitution. I am Prakriti Poddar, the Global Head of Mental Health and Wellbeing here at RoundGlass. RoundGlass focuses on holistic well-being, which in a nutshell is the interaction of our being with our internal and external universe. We uncover the symbiotic relationship of our thoughts on our body, our nutrition on our physical health, and our sleep on our recovery. And today we have with us a world-renowned doctor, scientist, educator, Dr. Derrick DeSilva. Thank you. And joining us virtually from Ontario, Canada, is a professor and a human behavior enthusiast who is helping overwhelmed and overcommitted people every day, Melanie Sodka. She is also a podcaster and has personally suffered significant burnouts. She will reveal how she takes care of herself and others to stay strong. All of us have a personal interest in the topic, boost your immune system in challenging times. I want to welcome all of you. My hope is that today's conversation will empower our audience with information to help boost our immunity, build an armor of protection, and fortify our well-being. I want to thank all our virtual audience attending today. And if any questions come up, please use the chat. Let's dive straight in. Dr. DeSilva, I'd like to start with the definition of what our immune system is.
Well, you said it already. It's our defense system. It is when we are exposed to something, doesn't matter what it is, a bacteria, a virus, whatever. If our immune system weren't there, if our defense system wasn't there, we would get catastrophically ill and maybe not even make it. So we're in the process right now of going through this battle. Yeah. And this battle, I say to people all the time, if you were a police officer and there was a riot outside and you were going out to defend and break this thing up, you wouldn't just go with your vest. You would take your gun, you would wear your helmet, you would use all of those components to protect yourself, to do what you have to do. And that's exactly what I want to allow people to know and have people know, that this is multifaceted. This is not just one thing.
No, that's amazing. That's a great analogy. It's a battle that we have to arm ourselves against. And we've seen so many people getting ill. I'd really like to share with the audience what are some of the crucial sort of building blocks to armoring yourself at this point.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that you have to do. Is number one, you need to use common sense. We're talking about stress. Stress will debilitate and destroy your body on every level. Yeah. On every level. What are some of the simple things? Number one, sleep. Sleep is when the immune system really rebuilds. Number two, hydration. If your body is hydrated, what's going to happen is the mucous membranes are now going to become very slippery and they're not going to become sticky. So if they're sticky, what happens is the viruses can definitely stick to and adhere to. So sleep, hydration, what you eat. If there's one thing that'll destroy your complete entire body is sugar. You've got to get rid of it and you've got to change your diet. And last but not least, you have to exercise. You have to move. And you have to be happy. You have to, all of these they're little things. Yeah. They're simple things that I think people just overlook.
Yeah, but that's amazing. I mean, I hear you talking about hydration, and there's so much out there about hydration, whether you do 3 liters, whether you do 2 liters, whether you do 5 liters, and you wash out all your vitamins. I mean, what do you suggest is the best kind of hydration level to keep ourselves at?
Well, there's a rule for hydration, and this is, by the way, if you don't have congestive heart failure or heart disease, or if you have kidney disease. If you have heart disease or kidney disease, you need to check with your doctor. But a good general rule of thumb is this. You take your body weight, let's say you're 100 pounds, you divide it in half, that's 50. You should be drinking about 80% of the 50. So you're
Wow.
roughly drinking about 40 to 45 ounces of water a day.
That's
So I drink about 70, I'm about 100, 152 pounds. I drink about 70 to 75 ounces of water a day.
wow. That I'm sure none of us are really doing that much. I mean, I think that's a great tip for us. Um,
I mean, I'll probably have to get up and use the restroom in the middle of this. So, at some point.
yeah. I mean, talking about stress, Melanie, I'd like to bring you in. There's been a battle of stress that you fought in different ways. So I'd love for you to share your story with the audience and really talk about what caused the burnouts that you faced and how does stress really play a part in your immunity and the lack of.
Yeah, and it's a great question because I think it's very individual, but I'm very happy to share my story. And I think it really comes from my biggest drivers that really drove me into burnout, those big states of stress and depletion, was about ambition at all costs. It was about subscribing to the hustle culture. It was about wanting to succeed and to continue to grow, but not knowing when to stop and not knowing how to put those guardrails in place to really protect my body, my immunity, my mental health, and my physical health. And so there's been a long journey in really trying to get better at this and really master the way that I can live a sustainably ambitious life without deteriorating my body.
Well, that's amazing. I love the phrase "sustainably ambitious life." I think I would really enjoy the audience hearing more about that because I mean, I am a personality A type, and I really do believe I manage everything well. But as Dr. Derrick DeSilva, I got COVID, and I was really upset with myself because I am a thoroughbred. I never get ill. I am always upbeat and happy. In fact, I like to be happy. It's one of my fortes. But my immunity dropped and I wasn't able to cope with blocking off this COVID. I mean, I didn't really have much in terms of symptoms because I listen to Dr. Derrick DeSilva and I take my vitamins. But it was there. But talking about this stress and talking about balancing your ambition with your well-being. Can you share a little bit about that, Melanie?
I sure can. I'd like to share with the listeners and those who are watching as well in terms of the three different types of burnouts that I had gone through. And they were all very different. And the symptoms were different. They appeared very different. And so just quickly highlight, I mean, the first one was in my 20s while I was in the corporate world. And I think a lot of people who are in corporate will probably nod their head in agreement to this one, because it was early in the 2000s where burnout actually wasn't a term that we were using quite a bit. It was, it was really about working and more than the 9 to 5. It was about the late hours. It was about the first to arrive and the last to leave. And those were really badges of honor. And I think when we subscribe to that, that's what really drives a lot of people into burnout. So that's changed over time, thankfully. And I think the pandemic has also changed the way that we work by not, being in the boardroom after hours and ordering meals and having team meetings. But I recall, this is a very personal and vulnerable piece, but I remember being so burnt out and so depleted that I would be driving almost 2 hours to work every day. And there's a bit of shame in this, but I was so depleted that I was hoping that I would get into a car accident so I would get a rest. And I think when you get to that deep, dark space in your life, this is where you are just, your body is telling you something. Your mental, capacity is telling you something. So that was the first one. And the second one was in my early 30s, where now there were physical ailments that were showing up, right? And, you push our body, we kind of say, we'll work out next month. I'll drink the 70, the liters of water next week. Like I'll do those things later. But this is where I started to experience a breakdown of my body, and my body was telling me trying to get through to me. So I was losing clumps of hair. And I can't wait to hear, what Derrick has to say about this as well. I was also getting all of a sudden these nosebleeds, these migraines with auras. I had cellulitis, which drove me to the hospital. I had tonsillitis, where the ER doctor said to me, "This is the worst we have ever seen." And I thought, what is going on with my body? But I kept pushing and pushing and pushing it until I went to the doctors. And the doctor said, "There's no medicine for this. The prescription that I'm writing for you is a month off of work." Now, you might be with me on this one, but I pushed back and I tried to negotiate this. I was like, wait a minute, I can't do a month. Like, I have to go back to work. Can we maybe make this a week? Can maybe we just, write the prescription for a week?
Yeah.
So it was just still burning the candle at both ends, which is a really common analogy. And the third one really goes into that emotional piece. It's where a lot of people right now in the pandemic might be experiencing anxiety and panic attacks and withdrawals and headaches. And I think, again, the pandemic has really exacerbated this in terms of the worry of getting sick, getting COVID. And we're breaking down our immunity and we're weakening our immunity by having all of this extra mental load put on us and all of these extra worries. So you can see the trajectory of the different burnouts and the symptoms that have showed up very differently over time.
Yeah, that's true. That's amazing. I mean, your 3 episodes are extremely different. And I have, Dr. Derrick here to highlight really what's happening there with the somatics and how it is showing up in the different phantom illnesses and actual illnesses.
It's very interesting that her first episode was in her 20s. 10 years later, it manifests physiologically. And that's something that I want people to really realize, is that you may be going through a catastrophic event now.
Yeah.
It is going to manifest physiologically in about 10 to 15 years. And I hate to say this, and I hate to use this analogy, but you need to understand this. When you go through a catastrophic event, the body goes through so much trauma and turmoil that it is hard to comprehend what's happening on a cellular level. And again, excuse me for using this analogy, but cancers take anywhere from 15 to 20 years to manifest. So that first cell that grows will show up 15 to 20 years later. So what she was going through with regard to the not being able to sleep, the R's, and quite honestly, Melanie, what was happening there was that your nutrients were completely depleted. So the first thing I thought about with you was magnesium. You had a severe deficiency of magnesium where you were getting migraines. B vitamins were completely gone. And in fact, that's how we treat migraines a lot of times today, are B vitamins and magnesium. And this was done at the Diamond Institute, the data behind this. And then 10 years later, you may be getting into now later stages of life, and now you're perimenopausal or you're andropausal, you're a man, and things really start to spiral. So now not only are you physiologically this is where all the physiology comes in with your hormones. It all works together. You have to control the burn from the beginning. And that's where the critical piece is.
I find that fascinating. I go to doctors all the time. They never ask me about my history going back like 15 years, right? This is why I love actually working with you and having you. You actually teach doctors this, right?
Yes.
Like how do you actually take a conclusive study on people? Because I think that's so important. When we, I do therapy as well, but when we do therapy, there is something where we actually do take people back to kind of understand where did it start? Like where is the point of entry of this issue? But I never, ever have those conversations with an internist. So I'm
past medical history, Prakriti. I can't tell you this again. Past medical history of what you've been through, what traumas have you been through, just like Melanie is saying, is so important to the puzzle.
Amazing. Melanie, I wonder if you had an experience with any doctor that actually broke that down for you, because you can ask, Dr. Derrick to kind of enhance that understanding right now, because I know that you work with so many people in capacity development, and I'm sure are also bringing this knowledge to them in some way. So if you have any questions you want to directly ask Dr. Derrick DeSilva here, please feel free.
I love being put on the spot, by the way. Give it to me. Come on. Come on.
That's why we have experts. That's why we have experts here. So.
Absolutely. And, just what I know about Dr. Silva is that, he has great analogies and he has such a wonderful way of putting into a perspective in bite-sized pieces. So I'm anxious to hear, how you'll react. Because to answer your question is, there wasn't necessarily a big diagnosis other than, you're just overcommitted and you might want to just drop some of the things that you're doing and resign from some of the things that you're doing. And when you're an ambitious person, that's really hard to do. But I quickly realized that burnout was no longer going to be the price of my ambition. And in order for me to stick to that, walk the walk and talk the talk, I had to do my own research. And a lot of us do. A lot of us go out and we read and we research and we take part in professional development. And that's what I did. And I think, the 4 states of capacity is where I put this into place to better understand how do people commit? How do people take care of themselves? How do people really, test themselves and go into that burnout? How do we prevent that? So, while I'm on this leave, I came up with my own remedy. And through my own research, I've, trademarked this assessment that helps you understand the 4 states of capacity. And so you can quickly understand from this assessment, where do you sit? Where are you operating from? And I think it's really important for people to take a proactive approach versus run to the doctor when it's too late. And, so have that reactive. So I know working with my medical professionals in my life that we can come up with a plan on top of the research that I've done and on top of the way that I end up helping people feel better and proactively take care of themselves.
Well, thank you for that. And I know that talking about research, you've been doing a lot on multitasking. But before that, yes. I know that you're not on leave because you're still working, but it's obviously a different phenomenon in your mind because you're easier in your day and routine because you're doing a lot online, but it isn't really a leave. So there's still that personality type that's in there, which you've managed to kind of balance out. But I'd love to talk about multitasking and your research on it.
Yes. Yeah, it's been fascinating. Again, just understanding how we operate, the 4 states of capacity. Multitasking is something that we've actually been trained to do. I mean, there's a lot of companies, at least 10, 20 years ago, that were rewarding people for multitasking. And I think that is interesting in how they've changed their tune. But what I have found in some research out of the University of California, Irvine, is that multitasking, they found, is making us dumb. It's actually reducing our IQ by 15 points. It's like driving, after having an alcoholic beverage. It's like operating, from a sleepless night. So I think these are some of the things that really come through that we need to understand.
I am so done with that.
And I know that I've watched Dr. Derrick DeSilva for a while because he's been with us, really guiding us in what integrative health and well-being really is. And we're actually building out a clinic that has that. And I know that mindfulness is a big part in that as well. And being mindful, such as Melanie suggested, which is the antithesis of multitasking, is so important. And I really would love for you to talk a little bit about what that means and what you do in your own life.
Well, let's do it this way. I don't know if you've ever did this when you were a child. If you took a magnifying glass and you shone it to the sun, and with that magnifying glass, it produces a light that you could literally start and burn a fire with, right? Why? The reason is because that light is coming through that glass and it's concentrated light that produces enough heat to burn.
Yeah.
If you diffuse the light, if you took that light and it wasn't a straight beam, what would happen?
Yeah.
It wouldn't even get
effect.
warm.
Yeah.
So what are you really trying to do? If you're really trying to make a difference, well then, for goodness gracious sake, focus. Focus on what you're doing. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I do that I think is really important is that, and when you said this before we got on set, I was like, how do you know that? When I go to sleep at night, I just love to lay in bed and just read something light. Just read something light. Something very simple. Or The other thing that I love to do is I love to look at pictures of my grandchildren.
Oh,
You know, I love to look because it just takes me to a different level.
wow.
So something simple that is going to take you into a different state.
Amazing. And I think that, talking about the routine that you do, I know that pickleball is really interesting to you.
Don't tell everybody my secrets. Come on.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
We talk a little bit about pickleball. I always find the time to exercise. I have, and I'm not afraid to say this. I just got my Medicare card. I'm going to be 65 in a couple of months, in 2 months. And I'm very happy with that. I'm very proud of that. I stay active. Everything works and my brain works. Everything else works. And I think that's important. And I think it's all those little pieces together is what's going to make you a success.
Yeah, 100%. So that's your nutrition. We have your emotional well-being and your meditation and breath work. And we have sports. And Melanie, how do you now actively deal with your stress or the capacity to ward it off?
Yes. And again, what I study and what I help people with is managing that capacity. And I just want to draw a quick distinction, because just because we have an hour in our calendar doesn't necessarily mean we'll have the capacity, the emotional, the physical, the emotional capacity to actually tackle that task or that appointment or that meeting. And I think that's what we do, is we really overestimate that energy and we end up overcommitting. So I'm very careful before giving a yes to say, I'm going to pause, or I'm going to come back to you on that. And one of the things that I also help people with is the language. Sometimes we need language to help with that, to say, I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity for that right now, or thank you for thinking of me. I just don't have the capacity for that task or that commitment right now. And as soon as we use this language, I feel like the stress reduces in the ability to control the energy and to control our commitments. So that's one way for sure. I know that in order to help my immunity, there are things like I do in terms of routine. So Dr. DeSilva, in terms of the water intake, I'm very, very conscious of that. I have that monster water bottle that I will not show on camera right now. That's right beside me. But that's the only way I can remember to take in that water. Sleep is a big deal. And sleep is easier said than done. And for me, it's, just what Dr. DeSilva said too, is what can we do before that bedtime routine, or to incorporate into that routine to really get us to be at ease to go to sleep. If there's so many things that we're ruminating on and it's just, it's really floating around in our minds, we need to deal with that in order to have that peaceful sleep. I just finished teaching a course on capacity management where I've had 2 people email immediately and just say, I had the best sleep of my life because we had gone through some of the things that I needed to work out. And so, that is, it's just so valuable when we get to work on that. Morning routines as well, in terms of use of probiotics in my shake. I have the exact same shake. I've been, maybe Dr. DeSilva can tell me if this is right or not, but I have the exact same ingredients every single morning. And my family's like, no, not the blender again. But it's a routine, and it really gets me off to the day in a good start.
That's amazing. And Dr. DeSilva is a library of of good nutrients and vitamins and supplements. So if you could shed some light on what are the most important things, especially during this whole COVID time, to keep us boosted, energetic, keep ourselves healthy, and also improve our sleep.
Well, let me back into that. 70% of our immune system resides in our intestine. So Melanie, you are right on. 70% of our immune system resides in our intestine, and you have to have the right flora in order for your body to do what it needs to do. Yeah. Also, 70 to 80% of the neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, all of those, guess where they're made? They're not made here. They're made here. Can you see that? Right here.
In the gut.
They're made in the gut. And that's why this is so important. And very quick story. I have 3 grandchildren, as I told you. All 3, and God's given me 2 sons and 3 grandsons. Like, where are the girls? Come on. But all 3 of the boys, when they were born, the first feeding in the hospital, they got a pediatric probiotic. Oh, wow. That's how important this is to me. Number 2, vitamin D. the way vitamin D works is that it doesn't work on the spike protein when it comes to the COVID virus. It works by a completely different mechanism that doesn't allow the virus to replicate. So it can't even attach, let alone do anything else.
Yeah.
Number 3 would be things like vitamin C. Vitamin C, the Linus Pauling Institute has been talking about vitamin C for 8 decades. That's how important. There are 5,000 studies talking about vitamin C on PubMed and the role of vitamin C with infections. And last but not least is zinc.
Yeah.
Zinc, by the way, is also extremely important. The University of California did a study talking about how important zinc is for the kidneys. So people that have kidney issues and also have COVID, that's a key. So these basic nutrients are what I personally, I use a lot more, but that's some of the basis of people that can at least get to try.
Amazing. So the recap is vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and I've got it, probiotics.
Probiotics, absolutely. I mean, I pressed the recall button for her.
It's all the probiotics. My gut and my intuition's working really well as well.
Absolutely.
Right. But I'd like to, there are so many people battling with this. And I know that when we, like right in the beginning, I did mention that loneliness and fear really feeds on lowering your immunity. I'd really like to talk about the mind and body connect at this point.
Oh, I think fear, and think about this, right? If you are afraid, if you are unsure, what do? You just kind of pull in.
Yeah.
So fear, I don't think people should fear what's going on right now. What you have to do is be proactive. Put the armor on. Put the armor on. Put the armor on your body. Get the helmet. And I'm talking figuratively, not literally. And make sure that you're prepared. Yeah. Prepare for what's coming. Don't be afraid, because all you're going to do is suppress your immune system even more.
Yeah. That's incredible. Melanie, I know that you're working with so many people in helping them build capacity. What I really loved about how you phrased it was that people don't have to fear saying no anymore, because that's the biggest fear I've seen. People just don't want to say no, right? And here you've kind of used another term that seems less offensive, and it's about, hey, I don't have that capacity anymore. I want to just bring that in, linked with what Dr. Derrick DeSilva was talking about right now in terms of fear and your capability of overcoming and moving beyond that.
Yeah, I think, personally during the pandemic, I felt, as an entrepreneur, as a speaker, as a facilitator and coach, I was at the mercy of, because we really had to change our business model. So saying yes a lot, and the fear of saying no, the fear of missing out, the fear of not taking on an opportunity or serving a client, was one type of fear. And I think that fed into a lot of that frenetic pace. There's also the fear of getting sick. There's also the fear of, taking care of people, the mental load that women typically took on, especially during the pandemic, of taking care of everybody, making sure their children's mental health was taken care of, making sure relationships were still intact, that meals were being, that we were just respecting the rules. So I think there's just a lot of variables that play into that fear that, again, to Dr. DeSilva's point, could suppress that immunity, because it's taking up so much energy, and that we need to take even better care of ourselves when we get to that point. So, giving people tools in terms of how to be less, fearful of some of those consequences, and approach it more with a mindful state, and really open-minded and more of a healthy perspective, and reducing some of that fear, really asking ourselves, like, is this a true fear, or is it something that it might be, a self-protection type of block that I could work through and I can break through. So it's really important to just kind of take a step back, give yourself some space to really analyze, what is in front of me, and what do I need to do to make sure I take care of myself.
Can I just comment on capacity? And again, I really love the way she phrased that.
Yeah.
Right. And again, if you think of your capacity, think about your electric box in your house. Mm-hmm. You only have so much capacity in that box. And once it goes over, what happens? You trip, you break, yeah. you trip a fuse. Yeah. And I think that's what happens with us in our own bodies. Yeah. We trip a fuse, yeah. and you just, start to collapse. Yeah. So I'm just going to say, I don't have the capacity. Get away from me.
That's great.
Go away.
I mean, I remember this personal story for me was when, I had a premature baby, and he was 50 days premature. So we were in the NICU for a while. And I remember for 2 years not having the capacity to fall ill. My immunity was on hyper boost because I had to prevent my kid from being in anyone's harm, and I had to be there, and there was no capacity for me to fall ill. And I knew in my head that the moment I have space, I'm going to collapse. But at that point, there was just something holding me up. And I know that it works in this way. And in fact, Melanie, to your point where you said, hey, I just thought of can I get into a car crash so I can stop and pause? And I think that I had that same feeling when my kid was in the NICU and the subsequent 2 years after that. I'd love you to talk about how that box didn't trip when I knew it couldn't.
Right. And this is, again, fear is okay. It is okay to be fearful because it's that fight or flight, physiology that we have, sympathetic versus parasympathetic system. If you're being chased by a tiger, right, and you better run, okay? And I'm not afraid of that dude. I'm okay. No, you're being chased by something. You got to go. Yeah. The problem is that if you keep running and running and running and running for the next 3 months or 6 months, you're not Forrest Gump, okay? So you got to stop at some point. But if you keep going, that's where the fatigue and the body just says, forget it, I can't do this anymore. Yep. And that's when you collapse. So fear in itself is not a bad thing. It's controlling that emotion and not allowing it to become chronic. Acute is okay, chronic is not.
Can you tell the audience the difference between acute and chronic stress?
Anything in medicine that is acute is something that is happening at the moment, right? It's right now. It becomes chronic. It becomes a chronic condition if it lasts more than 3 months. So is it acute depression or is it chronic depression? I can treat acute depression with various things, therapy. You're an expert in meditation and things like that. Yes, I can get you through that. But if it becomes a chronic situation where you are chronically, it's affecting your life, it's affecting your lifestyle, that's when it becomes a problem. So the definition is really over 3 months when it becomes chronic.
Oh, that's great to know. Talking to your point, I had to do a pause because my second kid, I was on bed rest for 7 months. So it was like a natural pause.
Listen, having children is like a whole nother thing, all right?
But, the audience here is very engaged and they wanted to know a couple of things. First, tell them about the formula again for how much liquid, how much water, how much they have to take in. They want to know that. They also want to know about so apart from the hydration, they also want to know what is the best probiotic to have and how do you choose that? I know. We don't want to give any brand names here. We're not doing any marketing, right? So,
brand names.
So those two things we'll tackle those two things and then I'll move on.
What was the first question?
Formula for hydration.
Wait, you weren't paying attention? Come on. I'm not saying it again. Too bad. I'm only talking about probiotics. You can rewind it. But seriously, let's talk about the hydration formula. Is your body, two exceptions to the rule. If you've been in a state of congestive heart failure, this doesn't apply. Or if you have kidney disease, this doesn't apply. All right? Anybody else should be okay. Even high blood pressure, just be careful. The formula is your body weight divided in half. So if you're 150 pounds, you should be drinking about 65 to 70 ounces of water. Okay? Yes, people say, well, then I'm peeing all day. Stop whining and do what you're supposed to do. I'm not into whining. Okay? So if you want to whine, don't come and see me. As far as probiotics go, I think probiotics are there's if you go to some of the stores, there's a bazillion types of probiotics. Find a company you like, find a company you trust, and go with them. Mm-hmm. What I tell people is look at the technology. I developed some technology many years ago, actually out of Canada, and where I took the organisms and encapsulated them. But the better technology today is encapsulated capsules so that they're acid stable. You don't need a bazillion organisms. You need to have enough just to do what it needs to do with some variety. So probiotics, folks, they're tough. Find a company that you like and stay with it.
Amazing. I know that as the audience has been asking questions, they really do want to know about your sustainability with ambition, because they don't understand how to work with sustainable ambition. So if you can highlight some key steps for them to elicit that information for themselves, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. If you think about sustainability, which is on the news, we talk about, finite resources on this earth and how we have to live more of a sustainable life. The same thing applies to our capacity. Our capacity is only finite. And, just like that analogy of the circuit box, I use the analogy of an elastic. And I do this with a lot of my clients too, is that when you have this rubber band, it has some stretch to it, right? We can stretch our capacity, but if we stretch it too much and too long, you can see my face and how it's like I'm ready to snap. The same thing applies. So where and how can we find that tension that we can walk around with in terms of being ambitious, being successful without burning ourselves out and doing that? And I think that's really taking control over your goals and really matching up your capacity with what it is you're trying to accomplish and getting the help and support that you need, talking to your manager. So these are really simple things that we just don't realize and we don't take the time to do, but having a conversation with your manager or with your team in terms of, here are the things that we have to get accomplished. Where are you guys at in terms of level of energy? What are the energy vampires that we can actually tackle? That would be the first thing. And understanding what that looks like in a team. Some of the other things that have been mentioned too in terms of sustainable ambition is taking care of yourself. Like I don't, it's really so simple, but we really refute simple. I think we look for the most complicated things to do to really take care of ourselves. But again, to echo what's been said today is really, again, that balanced diet, that sleep. I see a therapist, and because I think it's just, again, that proactive piece, just to really take care of my mind and my emotional capacity, because we are responsible for the energy that we show up with. Whenever we show up into a room, we are responsible for the energy that we bring. And so we have to take care of that. And capacity is this intangible thing that we can't see. And that is really a little bit more difficult to manage and to control. But once we start to focus on that, it has such a beautiful ripple effect on everything else in our lives. So really just slowing down, taking note, really auditing. We audit everything else. We audit our bank accounts. We audit our steps. We audit, the hours of sleep. But are we auditing the capacity that we have? How are we doing emotionally? How are we doing physiologically? And I think these are really important metrics to take into account. And it's not to give people an extra to-do. I think it's a reminder that it's has equal importance in the way that we go about our day-to-day lives to be healthy.
Well, thank you. And I gets me to my next point, because I know that we've talked about the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, and in that there is, in giving that we receive. And I know that you've been talking about the one good deed a day that aids your immunity and your well-being, and how that actually supports you during this time. I'd love you to share your ideas around that.
Prakriti, you know how to really hit my buttons. Honest to goodness, I almost have tears in my eyes, seriously, because I was trained by the Franciscans. So, and again, you threw me off again. You totally threw me off. Yeah, the Franciscan peace prayer to me is something that I really believe in. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. So it's not really a prayer for me. It's a way of life. And I think that, the whole idea of a good deed. So my signature on my emails is one good deed a day. And the reason I say that is doing one good deed a day will boost your immune system by 40%. Wow. So you're driving. I'm from New Jersey. You're driving in New Jersey, you're driving in New York, and you let somebody in traffic. How long does that take? 5 seconds, 6 seconds? Yeah. You don't have that time? Well, then you really have a problem. Yeah. Okay. But allowing that person in traffic to get in. But here's the beauty of this. the beauty of this is if I do that good deed, when I do that, and I do this every day, when I do that good deed, my immune system gets boosted by 40%. The person I do the good deed towards, their immune system gets boosted by 40%. But here's the beauty. Every single person that witnesses that good deed in traffic, their immune system gets boosted by 40%. And have you ever noticed that when you do it, somebody sees you and they do it too?
Yeah.
It's very infectious. And that's what I really love about this. And it's, how much does that cost?
Nothing.
Nada. Tú tienes que hacer esto. And it's just amazing how simple that really is.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, when I was in India right now, it's easier for me to do good deeds because there's so many people who need it. And, you know, it was just something my kids got exposed to. They'd be like, we'd buy some cookies, feed it to the dogs that were there, or like help people who are, you know, who need help. And there are so many more opportunities. But I like the simple opportunities that you're talking about as well. And I think it's incredible. And when you're doing that good deed, I love the matrix of what you're saying and how it impacts everybody around you and aids that. I wonder if, Melanie, you've had that experience and, you know, how you've used that experience to optimize your energy and well-being as well.
Yeah, simple acts of kindness. Absolutely. I remember this was like 15, 16 years ago back in my corporate days. And this isn't really free, but it was the pay it forward movement that had just been coined, right? And it's like buying the coffee for the person behind you. Even just, you know, my kids are into this. They're learning it so young. This wasn't a thing when I was a kid, but, you know, they're like, Mom, today my goal is to pay someone a compliment. And I was like, that's wonderful. And as soon as they do, you can see that it definitely boosts the spirits of everybody around that witnesses it. Now, I'm also teaching online, and a lot of my students are off camera, right? They don't want to be seen for different reasons. But at this point, what I encourage them to do is to smile and and everybody at once to unmute themselves and say hello. So as you get a whole bunch of jumbled voices, but as soon as you hear these voices, you can't help but smile. And smiling also has a chemical reaction in your body that makes you feel good. And I can't help but think, I mean, I'm not in the medical profession, but I can't help but think that has to do something positive to your body. So I totally agree with Dr. DeSilva in terms of these little acts of kindness, these little free things that you can do to help yourself feel better and all of those around you.
Well, Melanie, they're called endorphins.
They're
called endorphins. They're little packets that are the same. The structure of endorphins is the same as morphine.
Wow. So
imagine, you know, you get a little morphine rush.
Yeah. So I get the same. I mean, we're coming to the end, so I'll just share my 3 tips as well. I get the same from meditation, which I do regularly. I don't do very long meditations, to tell you the truth. 2 or 3 minutes of meditation is kind of good enough for me, and I do TM, which is transcendental meditation. It takes me no time to get to where I need to go in terms of the peace and harmony that I need in my brain and my mind and the complete silence. 3 minutes of that works for me. And then the other thing that I do is sports. I love sports. So I love to play tennis, and I love to go running now, which has become a new thing for me, by the way. And as a colleague of mine taught me a new brand of running called chi running. So it's become quite exciting for me.
You have tea while you're running?
No. And of course, the third thing, which I've always done correctly, is eating right. So those are my 3 top boosters, and of course friends, but that's my 4th one. But I'd like both of you to give us 3 tips each for the audience as we come to a wrap. So 3 tips of holistic well-being and how people can prevent themselves from falling ill, boosting their immunity.
I think for me, number 1 would be envisioning that rubber band that Melanie talked about, stretched all day, and just at the end of the day or at some point just saying, figuratively, I'm releasing the rubber band. For me, the way I release the rubber band is I do grounding. I try to do grounding as much as I can. Grounding is taking my shoes off and touching my feet on Mother Earth. It is phenomenal for you to do. Absolutely, nutrients and supplements, the 4 nutrients, vitamin C, probiotic, vitamin D, and zinc, critical. And last but not least, and I have to give you 4 also, would be get rid of the sugar. Absolutely get rid of the sugar. And do what you can to sleep.
Thank you. Melanie, over to you.
Oh my goodness, there are so many things that we can do. But again, I think that just focusing on three of them, is probably the best bet for success, or your best chance at success. And I would say a break from technology is huge. And that's hard because, running a business, being a professor, just all the other roles that I have in my life, the phone I find is constantly in my hand. Putting it away where it's out of sight, out of mind is one thing that I find extremely beneficial for my mind, my body, and being able to be present with people I love. The second thing is honestly my morning routine with my vegan shake with the protein in it and the probiotics and the veggies and the fruit, and the collagen. Like that is just something that I need and I know will set me up for a good day. The third thing, I work on this with my children, is the practice of gratitude. And I know that's being spoken and there are gratitude journals, and it may sound like that's, old news. I don't think that will ever go out of style. I think just really taking a moment before you go to bed and or when you wake up in the morning, just to say, look around and say, what is one thing that I can be grateful for? And even saying it out loud and sharing it with somebody will deepen that process of appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here and sharing your expertise. It's been totally invaluable. And I think the will have got massive amounts of information to boost their body immunity in these challenging times. You can also search for RoundGlass on our app or the website round.glass to find additional resources. Look for an article called Foods to Fortify You This Winter. Find out what foods can help improve your immunity. You could also take a short meditation session called Immune Boosting Pranayam. It is led by a wonderful teacher named Patwan Rhodes out of South Africa. You can use this meditation whenever you feel your body needs a detox or your immune system could use a boost. I'm Prakriti Poddar. Thank you for joining us.